It's the morning of April 5, 1968. Martin Luther King was assassinated yesterday. A third-grade teacher in a small town in Iowa walks into her classroom of 8-year-olds. She doesn't open a textbook. She doesn't give a speech about equality. She doesn't ask the children to imagine what discrimination feels like. She decides to make them feel it. By the end of that day, children who had been best friends since kindergarten were calling each other names. Academic performance had measurably dropped for half the class. And a group of 8-year-olds had discovered something about themselves that some of them are still processing 60 years later. Jane Elliott didn't run this experiment to publish a paper. She ran it because she was angry. And what she created, accidentally, imperfectly, controversially, became one of the most replicated and debated demonstrations in the history of social psychology. Jane Elliott was not a psychologist. She was a schoolteacher. Third grade, Riceville, Iowa. Population, 898. Riceville in 1968 was almost entirely white. Her students had likely never met a black person. Racism, for them, was an abstraction, a distant thing that happened somewhere else to people they'd never seen. The night of April 4, 1968, Elliott watched the news coverage of King's assassination and felt something she later described as a combination of grief and rage. Not just at the act, at the inadequacy of every conversation about it. We talk about it, she thought. We explain it, we condemn it, and nothing changes, because people who have never felt it cannot truly understand it. She went to bed that night with an idea that she knew was dangerous. And the next morning, she implemented it. Elliott walked into her classroom and made an announcement. Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. They are cleaner, more civilized, more important. This is simply a fact. No explanation, no source, no debate, just a calm, authoritative declaration from the most powerful person in the room. She gave blue-eyed children extra privileges. They got extra time at recess. They got to sit at the front of the class. They got seconds at lunch. They were allowed to drink from the water fountain. Brown-eyed children were not. Brown-eyed children were given brown paper collars to wear so they could be identified from a distance. And then, Elliott watched. Within hours, the blue-eyed children had transformed. They sat straighter. They answered questions faster. They became more confident, more assertive, and more casually cruel. One blue-eyed boy, a child described by Elliott as among the kindest in the class, told a brown-eyed friend at recess, "You can't play with us. You're brown-eyed." He said it without anger, without malice, as if it were simply a fact of the universe. The brown-eyed children broke faster than Elliott had anticipated. Within the first morning, children who had been performing at grade level began making errors on work they had completed correctly the day before. A girl who had been one of the strongest readers in the class stumbled over words she knew. A boy who normally finished math problems quickly sat staring at his paper. Elliott later described watching this happen as one of the most disturbing experiences of her life. She had been a teacher for years. She knew these children. She knew their capabilities. And she was watching those capabilities visibly diminish in real time because she had told them they were inferior. Not because they believed her exactly, but because the system believed her. The room believed her, their peers believed her, and when the entire social environment treats you as inferior, the performance follows. This is what psychologists would later call stereotype threat, the measurable cognitive impairment that occurs when a person is aware that they belong to a group that is negatively stereotyped in the domain they are being evaluated on. Elliott had accidentally demonstrated it in a third-grade classroom in Iowa 14 years before the term was coined. On the second day, Elliott reversed it. She walked in and announced, "I made a mistake yesterday. I had it backwards. Brown-eyed people are actually superior. Blue-eyed people are less intelligent, less civilized." She removed the collars from the brown-eyed children, gave them to the blue-eyed ones, and watched the entire dynamic invert within minutes. The brown-eyed children, who had been subdued and diminished, straightened up. Their performance recovered. Some of them became, within hours, every bit as casually cruel to the blue-eyed children as the blue-eyed children had been to them the day before. One girl, who had been mocked the previous day, told a blue-eyed boy, "How does it feel? Now you know." The blue-eyed children, now on the receiving end, showed the same performance drops, the same withdrawal, the same look that Elliott had seen on the brown-eyed faces 24 hours earlier. The pattern was not about eye color. It was not about the children. It was about the label, and the system built around the label. Elliott filmed the experiment. The footage exists. It has been shown in universities, corporations, and diversity trainings around the world for 50 years. But the most powerful data didn't come from the footage. It came from what the children said when they grew up. Elliott brought her former students back together for a documentary interview when they were in their 30s. What they described was remarkable. Several said the 2 days in Elliott's classroom were the most formative experience of their entire education. Not because of what they learned about racism, but because of what they learned about themselves. One man said, "I became a bully in less than a day. I had no idea I was capable of that. I was 8 years old and I was already everything I'd been taught to think was wrong." A woman said the day she wore the collar was the first time in her life she had understood what it meant to be judged for something she had no control over, and how quickly that judgment became indistinguishable from how she saw herself. By lunchtime, she said, "I wasn't performing badly because I was sad. I was performing badly because I believed her. I believed I was less." Elliott's classroom experiment sits at the intersection of three of the most important concepts in social psychology. The first, labeling theory. Developed by sociologist Howard Becker in 1963. The idea that labels applied by authority figures don't just describe behavior. They produce it. When a child is told they are inferior, they don't just feel inferior. They begin to perform inferiority. Not as a choice, as a self-fulfilling prophecy encoded by the environment around them. The second, stereotype threat. Psychologists Claude Steele and Joshua Aronson demonstrated in 1995 that simply reminding a person of a negative stereotype about their group before a test measurably reduces their performance, even when they don't consciously believe the stereotype. The awareness of the label consumes cognitive resources that would otherwise go toward the task. Elliott's brown-eyed children, told they were inferior, made to wear the collar, were experiencing stereotype threat at maximum intensity. The third, in-group, out-group dynamics. Henri Teifel's minimal group paradigm, developed in the early 1970s, showed that people will discriminate against out-group members even when the groups are assigned completely arbitrarily. Even when there is nothing at stake. Even when the participants know the groups are arbitrary. Elliott's experiment preceded Teifel's formal research and demonstrated the same phenomenon with devastating clarity. You don't need history. You don't need culture. You don't need ideology. You need one authority figure, one label, one morning. Elliott's experiment has been criticized, seriously, substantively, and fairly. The children didn't consent. Their parents, who were informed after the fact, were divided. Some were grateful. Some were furious. One parent said Elliott had psychologically damaged their child. Elliott herself never claimed this was rigorous science. She called it a teaching tool, a demonstration, not an experiment. The follow-up data was limited. The sample was tiny, 30 children, all white, all from the same small town. No control group, no standardized measurement. In formal academic terms, it proves nothing. But here is what makes Elliott's work impossible to dismiss. It has been replicated, not in third-grade classrooms, but in corporate training rooms, university seminars, and adult diversity workshops around the world. With adults, with executives, with people who know exactly what is happening and why, and still show measurable changes in performance and behavior within hours of being labeled inferior. The methodology was flawed. The phenomenon was real. Jane Elliott paid a price for what she did. Riceville, Iowa, population 898, did not receive her experiment well. She was shunned by neighbors. Her children were bullied at school because of what their mother had done. Local businesses refused to serve her family. She received hate mail, death threats. A teacher from a neighboring school told her, "How dare you do that to white children?" Not, "How dare you do that to children?" White children. The response to Elliott's experiment became its own demonstration of the experiment. She continued anyway, for decades, running versions of the exercise for adults, in corporations, in government agencies, in diversity trainings around the world. She is now in her 90s. She has never stopped. And her central argument, the one she has made for 50 years, is not about race specifically. It is about this. Prejudice is not learned. It is taught. And anything that is taught can be unteached. But first, you have to feel it. Not understand it. Feel it. Elliott's experiment illuminates something that goes far beyond a classroom in Iowa. Every label that a system attaches to a group of people operates by the same mechanism. These students are gifted. These students have learning difficulties. This neighborhood is dangerous. This candidate is overqualified. This person is a flight risk. Each label, applied by an authority, reinforced by a system, visible to the people being labeled, produces measurable changes in behavior and performance. Not because the people are weak. Not because the label is believed. Because the cognitive load of navigating a world that treats you as less consumes the exact resources that performance requires. This is not theory. This is one of the most robustly replicated findings in all of social psychology. And it operates invisibly. In every classroom, every workplace, every courtroom, every hospital where labels are applied to human beings by other human beings with authority. Here is what Jane Elliott's experiment ultimately asks of each of us. Not, "Are you racist?" Not, "Do you discriminate?" But something harder. What labels are you carrying right now that were put on you by someone else's authority? You're not academic. You're too sensitive. You're not leadership material. People like you don't do things like that. Somewhere between age 6 and age 12, most of us were handed a collar. We didn't ask for it. We didn't choose it. But somewhere along the way, we stopped noticing we were wearing it. And we began performing it. The question Elliott spent her life asking was never about race. It was about this. Who told you what you were? And why are you still believing them? In 1972, 4 years after Elliott's classroom, a psychologist named David Rosenhan decided to test something even more fundamental. Not what happens when a label is put on a child, but what happens when a label is put on an adult by the most authoritative institution in modern society. He sent 8 completely sane people, including himself, into psychiatric hospitals. Their only instruction: complain of hearing a single word. After that, behave completely normally. Every single one of them was admitted. Diagnosed with serious mental illness. Held against their will. And when they told the staff they were sane, when they acted normally, took notes, asked questions. The staff didn't see sanity, they saw symptoms. Because the label had been applied. And once a label is applied by authority, reality bends around it. That experiment has a name, and it will change how you think about diagnosis, sanity, and who gets to decide what is real. That is next.